Welcome to the latest edition of the Big Stuff Podcast. Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania. And Elton, we are nearing the end of January here, and still, I wouldn't say a lot of separation here in the conference standings. Bunch of 4-3 teams, a bunch of 3 or 4 teams. Michigan State stands alone at 6-1. Obviously, bounced back from the first conference loss with a big home win against Wisconsin, but really still a lot of parity in this league.
Yeah, I think that's been the story of the league so far. You've got a log jam of teams there just sitting in second and third place waiting to pounce. I think what's really interesting is, when we first started doing this podcast, Ohio State and Michigan, looked like it was, they were going to be the powers of the league. They were both in the top 5. You look at it now, and they are, I believe, 11th and 12th, respectively, Michigan and Ohio State in the Big Ten standings. Michigan's at 2-4, Ohio State's at 2-5. Just showing just how deep this league is. One of the surprises has been, obviously Rutgers, checking it at 24, first time in 41 years that the Scarlet Knights have cracked the top 25. But Rutgers and Illinois. Illinois is at 21. They made their first appearance in the top 25 for the first time since the 2014 season. They're sitting at second and third in the conference, tied for second rather in the conference with 5-2 records. So, this league is deep as it's ever been, and I think these records just reflect that fact.
Yeah, I think there was thought coming into the season that Brad Underwood's team might be able to break out and have a good season at Illinois, and they have. But obviously the huge surprise is Rutgers. And, we're going to have our guest, Aaron Breitman, later on from On the Banks, the SB Nation site, to talk a little bit about the Scarlet Knights this year. But they're really getting it done on the defensive end of the floor, only giving up 60.7 points per game, which leads the Big Ten. So they're really clamping down on guys. Excuse me, that's actually second best. Maryland's at 60.1 points per game. But Rutgers is really kind of doing it on the defensive end of the floor. They're 13-0 at home. So they're playing really well at the rack this year. And just a really, like I said, it's a really, really balanced team, and a team that, is, right now really exceeding expectations.
Yeah, well, if you look at you look at their schedule, Rutgers has won 8 of its last 9 games. That lone loss coming at Illinois, a 3-point loss, they lost 54-51. They've been on a tear. I think I'd be lying if I said that I'd have Rutgers sitting at 14-4 overall, second in the Big Ten, 24th in the country at the beginning of the season. But Steve Peichel has done an excellent job with just kind of getting this team ready to play. And they're showing in this week that, to be successful in this league this year, you've got to win at home and on the road. You mentioned they're 13-0 at home. They've won the majority of their road games, which can't be said for a lot of the teams in the league this year. So Rutgers has really, really been the story of the conference this season.
Yeah, and it's certainly, the question is, can you sustain it now? I think that's going to be the big thing now that they have the targets on their backs. You're 7 games in, and it's a 20-game conference season. So you still have 13 to go. There's a lot of basketball to be played. Certainly a team like, Ohio State or Michigan right now that's kind of slumping. We saw during the non-conference schedule what they're capable of, and they might be able to heat up as well. Certainly a big week this week for Indiana, who did pick up their first road win of the season, beating Nebraska 82-74 on Saturday night. And, kind of an interesting side story to that, their plane had mechanical problems on Friday, and there were some weather issues. They didn't fly in until the day of the game, the morning of the game, and still managed to play one of their best games of the season, going on the road and beating Nebraska. They built a 19-point lead, and they held on 82-74 for the Hoosiers. But this week coming up, you've got number 11 Michigan State, followed by number 17 Maryland. Both games at Assembly Hall, one on Thursday against Michigan State Thursday night, and then the Sunday afternoon game against Maryland. And this is, I think, a chance for Archie Miller's program and Indiana's program to show, in year 3, that they're back and that they're a team capable of contending for a title. But, a huge week, I think, for the Hoosiers. And you get those 2 games at home where Indiana's been pretty good this year. They're 11-1.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at Indiana, and it started off the season, I believe, on an 8 or 9 win games before losing a 20-point contest to Wisconsin. Mounts back to 3 consecutive wins before dropping back-to-back losses to Arkansas and Maryland, and they've gone 3 out of their last 4. Indiana, I don't think. I can't say consistency has been a problem. You look at the body of work so far, sitting at 14-4. They're trending upward. You mentioned grabbing a road win at Nebraska was huge. They host Michigan State. On Tuesday, they host Maryland on Sunday. So we'll see if that theory of these home teams, holding firm, in the Big Ten stands true. But if they can get wins against 2 top 25 programs, the number 11 Michigan State, number 17 Maryland, I think that would be huge for that program.
Yeah, a huge week, and, their front court played very well in the Nebraska game. Justin Smith, Trace Jackson-Davis, and Joey Brunk all in double figures scoring. Trace Jackson-Davis posted a 6th double-double this season, and I think they really feed off him. When they get the ball to him in the post and when they get him touches and when they get that whole front court touches, they're a much better team. They made 8 3-pointers in that game against Nebraska, which is up. They were Big Ten low, 5 3-pointers per game coming into the game. So they made some perimeter shots, but they did that by working the ball inside out, and that's what they have to do more of offensively to be successful. They're playing a little better defensively now, certainly a lot better than they did in November and December, and that's helping as well. That's helping them withstand kind of the scoring ruts that they go through during certain games. But this will be a big week. I think this will be a big test, and you have to think if you can at least split these 2 games at home, you get another quality win on your resume. You're looking pretty good going into February and March for a chance to kind of break that 3-year schneid of not going to the NCAA tournament.
Well, Illinois is definitely has primed itself to make a run for it. Like you mentioned, getting contributions from those double-figure scorers. I saw that they were 31 of 61 from the field, so they hit 50% of their shots while holding Nebraska to 39%. So the defense was holding strong. I think even one win in these next 2-game stretch would go a long way for their resume and their chances to, get a boost in for their prospects for March Madness.
Yeah, meanwhile, Penn State over the weekend at home, they bounced back against Ohio State, picked up that win, kind of avenged that December loss in Columbus. Certainly, at 13-5, they're still in the mix, certainly for a NCAA tournament spot. How are things going down in Happy Valley in terms of the Nittany Lions?
Well, we spoke with Pat Chambers on Monday of last week. Was coming off of that Wisconsin loss in between the trip to Minnesota. And he was very, very, firm in saying that, hey, guys, I'm not going to panic. We're not going to panic. He gave the guys the day off on Sunday. He said a bit of a mental health day to just go in there and just hit the reset button. That 3-game losing stretch that they went on, they lost at Rutgers, they lost to Wisconsin, and they lost to Minnesota. They were not getting a lot of production from the bench. Myron Jones, who's done very well for him, hit a bit of a shooting slump. Miles Brett, another guy, hadn't scored any points against Rutgers, Wisconsin, or Minnesota. They came out there on Saturday against Ohio State and really just went back to playing the type of ball that we saw them play early in the season. Miles Brett broke his slump. He was 2 of 2 from the field, finished with 10 points. Lamar Stevens only played 22 minutes, but he was still able to get 24 points in those 22 minutes. Myron Jones, 20 points contribution. Seth Lundy made his first start at point guard, coming in there for Miles Brett. He had 12 points, was 3 of 6 on his 3-point attempts, and just an all-around effort from the Nittany Lions, and a much-needed win for this team as it embarks on the next part of its schedule, which starts tomorrow with the trip to Michigan. They return back to the Bryce Jordan Center on Wednesday, January 29th, to play Indiana. So, that was a good way for them to break back into the win column and to embark on this road trip here coming up tomorrow with the win.
Yeah, well, certainly, with Penn State, I think it starts with Lamar Stevens as well, and he's the guy that, has that kind of star quality that, certainly could ride him to a lot of conference wins. And I think his play is going to be pretty critical down the stretch here as we go into February and March, and his leadership. And if he can do that, then maybe Penn State will, end up getting a bid, which would be huge for the fans in Happy Valley there. That it'll save them from just having to think about spring football in March and April.
And that's one of the things Chambers was saying was, he's confident Stevens can get it done. One thing that Stevens has battled recently was just a state of fouls. He's been kind of, you can call it what you want. I guess folks in Happy Valley would say they're unfair calls. The rest would say they're doing their job. But, the last few games he's been called with a lot of fouls, which has forced him to hit the bench earlier than expected. But, Chambers was saying what he wanted to see was full contributions from the rest of the team, guys stepping up so that when Lamar Stevens, if he gets into that foul trouble, they can come in and really not to have that much of a drop-off. And he got that on Saturday.
Yeah, and no question that's going to be big. Him avoiding foul trouble. You need a player of that quality on the court, no doubt. So let's move on to a couple of Jekyll and Hyde teams in the league, Maryland and Iowa. Two teams that are still ranked in the top 25. Still two teams with a lot of potential. They're both kind of sitting at 4-3 in the league. For Maryland, 11-0 at home, 0-4 on the road. I think that's been the big issue. They have not played well away from College Park. And then Iowa, a very good scoring team in Luke Garza and Joe Wieskamp, but really not maybe necessarily playing a high-level caliber defense yet. What do you see in these two teams going forward?
Well, one of the issues with Iowa was that in the early season, Iowa had been plagued a bit by the injury bug. They lost a couple of key contributors. Garza is, last I checked last week, he was the Big Ten's leading scorer, but he could only do so much. But, mounting early season injuries and just, falling victim on the road really plagued them. But Iowa's played well as of late. They've won 3-0, a contest against, ranked Maryland and then ranked Michigan last week. They're coming off of those wins. And we'll see what Iowa's about this week. It starts tomorrow with the top 25 matchup at home against Rutgers.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big one. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch an Iowa-Rutgers game because you got two teams in the top 25 there. And, with Maryland, there were a lot of high expectations this year. Steve Turgeon, you have Cowan, Jalen Smith, and for some reason, they certainly clamped down and they won at home. They beat Purdue in kind of a ugly game that was in the 50s, but they're only scoring 61 points per game in conference play, and you got to figure that offensively they're going through some issues now. They've got to be a little more productive than that, I think, going forward. To get back in and contend for a Big Ten title.
Yeah, they're going to have to get production out of, someone other than Anthony Cowan Jr., who, is the leader of this team, the point guard. He's averaging 15.6 points per game and 4.2 rebounds per game. But outside of him, they're not really getting that contribution. And that was one of the things that had a lot of people high on Maryland this year. They returned a lot of the depth from last season, and people were saying that if it could kind of all just coalesce and come together, then Maryland was a team to watch out for. But, halfway through the season, we're seeing that it's kind of the Anthony Cowan show, and this is a team that at home they've been as good as anybody. But, unfortunately, you can't play all your games at the Xfinity Center, Maryland, so they're going to have to go out there and get some road wins.
Yeah, so what's the how is the Xfinity Center? I'm sure you're being a Maryland native. You've probably been there a few times. How does it compare to the old barn that they used to play in at Maryland?
It's not the Cold Field House. The traditionalist in me would like to say that no other basketball arena was greater than the Cold Field House. But the Cold Field House is still used by the school as part of the training facility. But the Xfinity Center is modern. It's nice. It's huge. It's a great facility. Yeah.
Well, it's something you learn. You're going to learn something new every day here on this podcast, and that's one of them. But the big story this week is Rutgers. And we have on a special guest, Aaron Breitman, who covers Rutgers for SB Nation on the Banks. We will get to him coming up on the Big Stuff podcast. This is Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania. Welcome back to the Big Stuff Podcast. Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania. Coming up, our guest, he is a Rutgers grad, the class of 2000, and he is a managing editor for SB Nation's Rutgers site on the Banks. And I've been on the beautiful banks of the Raritan River before, Aaron. At one time back in the day, I covered a Florida Rutgers game at the RAC, and Eli Carter went off at 31 points, and they beat the Gators in overtime. So it was certainly interesting then, and but now these are pretty happy days here in Piscataway, New Jersey, with Rutgers being ranked for the first time in 41 years. So, Aaron Breitman, pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, that's a great story to start. So it's one of the few fun memories we have of the last couple of decades of Rutgers basketball was that game. So that's funny you were there for that. But yeah, it's been a amazing season so far. Definitely has exceeded expectations in Steve Pikiell's fourth season. The hope going in was that he would break the 14-year drought of having a winning season, and the postseason, NIT was really the goal. But here we are, mid-January, nationally ranked for the first time in 41 years, and as of now, firmly projected to make the NCAA tournament. So it's been a heck of a season so far, and obviously it's going to be a long road ahead, but it's pretty amazing where they're at right now.
Yeah, no question, Aaron. And, I have a good friend of mine who's a Rutgers fan. I've alluded to him on my football podcast before, Cliff Olson. He's kind of down in the dumps, with the way things were going football-wise. He came over, visited me for the Indiana game. They obviously lost that game 35-0. But he's on cloud nine now because not only do you bring in Greg Schiano for football, but this team being ranked for the first time in 41 years. Give me an idea of the vibe, what it's like around campus at games. How has maybe the community and the state kind of embrace this team?
It's, there's certainly a palpable energy, a buzz. The fact that they announced today that the Nebraska game on Saturday is already sold out. That will be the fourth consecutive sellout. That hasn't happened in several decades. It's just, people are dying of thirst, Rutgers fans, for any amount of success. Obviously, wrestling has had some success and has a strong future ahead. But with football being as bad as they were, and, Rutgers basketball, 2016, March, when Pikiell was hired, they finished 279th in KenPom. They won 7 games. This was not just the worst Power 5, high major college basketball team that season. They were the worst probably of the last decade, arguably. So for them to come as far as they have so quickly under Pikiell, who had a clear vision, had true experience rebuilding the program when he was at Stony Brook, to see it all to come together the way it has this year, we started to see, signs each year. And last year, definitely, we started to see things start to happen. 7 Big Ten wins was, the most by far. But here, this season with this team, a core group of sophomores, they're you can see that it's starting to click. It's such a selfless team, fun team to watch. It's just, people are in cloud nine.
Yeah, and they're getting it done defensively. 58.7 points per game. That leads the Big Ten when you include all the game. They're second in conference games, 60.7 points per game allowed. So, this is certainly a unit that's getting it done on the defensive end of the floor, and I'm curious the process for Steve Pikiell to get the players to buy in defensively. How much of it do you see as effort, or how much is he even recruited to that in terms of maybe some of the length, the size of some of these players that he has on the team?
No, he's absolutely followed a blueprint for what he envisioned. Since day one, rebounding and defense has been the core part of the culture on the court, and what he's steadily done is just improve talent year over year. He's very upfront in the recruiting process. He goes after guys. He really, I know it's a little bit cliche, but he really doesn't buy into the star ratings as much. He finds his guys, the guys that fit his program and what he's looking to do. And he's found a lot of hard-nosed guys that were overlooked and that have a chip on their shoulder and that play well as a team. 7 different players have led them in scoring this season, which is really phenomenal. There really isn't one true star, and they just play so well together on both ends of the floor. They're unselfish on offense. They're really connected on defense, and it's been amazing to see the fact that their defense has always been good under Pikiell, but just with the improved talent, now it's elite. And the offense has always been bad under Pikiell, and now they're, definitely better than average. I wouldn't say they're even they're nowhere near a great offense, but I think you're seeing with elite defense, elite rebounding, and, serviceable offense, 2-point range. They're shooting 52%. They're, I think, top 50. So that's been really good. They still struggle from 3-point range and free throw shooting. But if you think about it, it's even more encouraging because once he continues to add more and more talent in 2 years, I mean, this team could be, they really could be near the top of the Big Ten. So, I mean, they're already there right now, but I think he's building a program to last, and that's going to be up near the top for a very long time.
Hey, this is Elton Hayes. I cover Penn State for CNHI. Pat Chambers last week, during that 3-game losing streak that Penn State had kind of went on after being ranked in the top 25, mentioned, it being fairly new territory for the Nittany Lions and dealing with those challenges and I guess, issues of having that bullseye on your back. With Rutgers, cracking the top 25 for the first time in 41 seasons, how do you think Coach Pikel will address and combat those new challenges of now being the team, playing as a top 25, program, opposed to just, being the prey?
Well, a great question. I was on a call with him again today, and he said it every week. He reminds the media, he reminds his players, they were picked 12th in the league, and it was actually the first time they've ever not been picked last. But he just keeps harping on being picked 12th in the league, and that's where we're picked. And I think he has done a really, really good job of keeping them focused in terms of the task at hand. And I he hasn't said it publicly, but I'm sure he's saying, you guys haven't accomplished anything yet. You're on the right path, but you're not there yet. And I think that I really feel like he's done an amazing job keeping them focused. And, this week actually going to Iowa is actually, I think, a blessing because Iowa's ranked higher than them. And Rutgers won at Iowa last season. So they have all the confidence in the world going in, but Pikel even said on the call today, we're not even the highest ranked team on the floor tomorrow. So I think, he's really a master at just finding ways to motivate this team. And he's going to keep chipping away at that. And I think, the calling card has really been, we were picked 12th to finish in the league. And I don't think he cares what they're ranked. He's just going to keep harping on that you haven't accomplished anything yet.
Hey, Aaron, Penn State snapped its 3-game losing streak on Saturday with the win against, then ranked top 25 Ohio State. That losing streak, funny enough, began at Rutgers with a 12-point loss. At 13-5 this season, Penn State is perhaps the deepest it's been under 9-year head coach Pat Chambers. In your opinion, in your time covering the Rutgers and I guess more specifically the Big Ten, how does this year's Nittany Lions team stack up against others you've seen, mainly in terms of the bench and the depth that it has?
I think that Penn State is a really good team. I've been high on Pat Chambers for a while. I even was kind of looking more into his process there. His 9th season now, I believe, just looking at some similarities to what he's done there compared to what Pikel is trying to do. And I think they're a really tough team, I think, defensively. And I think at home, too, they're proving to be really tough at home, even though, no disrespect, hasn't been the toughest home court in the conference for a while. But I think that they're certainly very difficult to beat at home. And I think even on the road, he travels. With Watkins inside, I think he's a fascinating player. I think he's so talented. Obviously, he's a little bit inconsistent, but I think their perimeter depth, they have a lot of good guards that can shoot. I think they're certainly a top half of the conference team. I'd be shocked if they didn't finish in the top 7 or 8 and went to the NCAA tournament this season.
Speaking of the NCAA tournament, do you think the Big Ten champion gives the conference its best to win the national tournament? Or do you think the league has enough depth that is, that it's, I guess it's up for anyone to grab?
I think, Michigan State certainly, I think, has the most talent. It'll be interesting to see if they can stay healthy. They've already had, some struggles this year. But I think they're starting to figure it out. I think that the Purdue game was really kind of a head scratcher how bad they lost at Purdue. But I think they certainly have the talent to win a national championship. To be honest, I'm not quite sure if another team in the Big Ten does. I think Maryland probably does, but they're so inconsistent, and I don't know if they're going to put it together or not. But I think otherwise, I think the Big Ten's the type of conference this year that could have maybe, I could see 4 or 5 teams going to the Sweet 16, but I don't know how many maybe are good enough to go to the Final Four. So I think it's a pretty deep conference, but in terms of national championship caliber, I would probably put, if I had to bet, I'd say Michigan State's probably the only hope to do that.
Yeah, there's always that thought of beating each other up during the season and, not being able to get to the finish line. Sometimes you have that in conferences that are deep and strong like that. Aaron, I want to finish up, talk a little bit about Geo Baker, because, in watching the Indiana game, his return, I thought was, made an impact. Even though he didn't score a lot, it seemed like this team kind of fed off his energy. What does he mean going forward, staying healthy? And certainly him and Ron Harper Jr., them kind of coexisting and playing off each other. How do you see that developing as the season goes on, too?
Yeah, definitely. Excellent point. I mean, Baker is the unquestioned leader of the team. It's really amazing. It just shows the progress they've made, though, in terms of them going 2-1 in conference play without him when he broke his thumb. And I think in a way it was a blessing because you saw players like Jacob Young, Paul Mulcahy, Caleb McConnell. They had more of a role. And they really stepped up, and they really have, since his return in the last 2 games, it really hasn't changed. They've still kind of had the same roles. I think Gio is battling back. I don't think, he's shooting-wise, he certainly hasn't looked himself. But like you said, I thought in the Indiana game at the end of the first half, he had 2 huge steals that led to transition baskets that really kind of changed the tenor of that game. He didn't have a basket the entire game against Minnesota. He comes in, he gets subbed in with a second on the shot clock, and he hits a 3 in the corner to basically seal the victory. So he's just that type of guy that he always makes the clutch play when they need it most. Ron Harper Jr. is the guy that I've said I really think if there is going to be a star on the team, he needs to emerge as that star. I think he's the best chance to be an All Big Ten player eventually, maybe not this season, but next season. I think for sure Baker's got to stay healthy. I think he just has a calmness about him, and that the team is, as much as they're bought into Pikel, I really think that I haven't seen a captain and a player having the rest of the team as plugged into him and wanting to please him. It's really amazing, and just how important he is to this program.
Okay, Aaron, it's been 1991 since Rutgers was last in the tournament, and I'm going to date myself here. That was my sophomore year in college. I had the Vanilla Ice haircut down at the University of Miami with little cubic zirconium in the ear and everything. So I want to know, is this the year the drought ends, Aaron? Is this going to be the first time since 1991 that Rutgers is going to make the dance?
I do. I think it is. I have been kind of cautioning people. I think the last 7-8 games of the regular season is a pretty difficult stretch for Rutgers. But I think their biggest asset right now is playing at home. And if they can hold serve at the rack, they're undefeated there. If they can do that, I mean, their toughest home games remaining on paper are Michigan and Maryland. Which won't be easy by any stretch, but, not unthinkable for them to win in that environment. I mean, every game is going to be sold out the rest of the way. They're just a different team at the rack. Looking at it, I mean, if they go 10-10 in the conference, 19 wins total, I think, not every season that would put them in, but I think this season, the way the all of college basketball is, how down the ACC is, obviously 20 wins, I think would clinch it. And I think they're right there. I think they could win 11 regular season games. And of course, that's not even counting the Big Ten tournament. So I just don't think it's in this team's DNA to fold. I'm sure they'll have a tough stretch, somewhat like Penn State has had. But I think they'll bounce back. And I think playing at home, like I said, I think is such a huge advantage for this team that I just don't see them fading. And I think this is finally the year. 29 years later, they go dancing in March.
All right. Well, there you have it. Aaron Breitman from SB Nation on the Banks. Be sure to tell us where we can find your work. onthebanks.com is our site. On Twitter, we're OTB_SB Nation. And my Twitter handle is Aaron_Breitman. onthebanks.com, and appreciate you guys having me on, and looking forward to a great rest of the Big Ten season. We'll keep in touch, Aaron. We appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
That's Aaron Breitman from On the Banks. And for the Big Stuff podcast, this is Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania, signing off.